Welcome everyone. Today we are going to be talking about standardized testing. It is 12 o'clock on the dot, so I want to go ahead and jump right in, and hopefully some others will be joining soon. This is the third of 5 sessions, and a couple of weeks ago we talked about purpose and calling, and we talked about making plans for after high school, and this week we are talking about standardized testing. As always, if you have questions, feel free to type them into the Q&A section, and I will answer those at the end. To begin, I'd like to share with you, let's see if I can advance these slides. Here we go. A little bit about what we offer here at Westminster Catawba Christian School. We offer the Dial 4 to our 4K students, the search assessment in kindergarten, and our SAGES 2 gifted screening to our first graders. We use the Terra Nova in grades 2 through 8. We use the PSAT 8-9 in grade 9 and the PSAT NMSQT in grades 10 and 11. We also were able to offer for the first time ever this fall the SAT school day option to our seniors, and we are planning to offer that to our juniors in the spring. And we also offer AP exams to grades 10 through 12, and those coordinate with the AP courses that we offer in-house. Additionally, today we will be talking about 2 other standardized testing options. That is the ACT and the CLT. For the purpose of today's webinar, we are going to be talking about standardized testing for the future. So that will be the PSAT 8-9 assessments and beyond. If you have questions about lower school testing assessments here at Westminster, you can contact one of our administrators, Dr. Jolly or Mrs. Swafford. And then if you have any questions about middle school testing, you can contact our middle school principal, Mrs. Michelle Embry. And then for all high school assessments, you can contact myself or our upper school principal, Dr. Furrow. And we're going to get into the PSAT 8-9 and beyond. We're going to go into a lot of detail in today's session. So in general, how do we use standardized testing results? And at Westminster, I'm going to go over how we use the results, and this will, of course, be similar at other schools as well. We always use the assessment results to evaluate the effectiveness of our curriculum. We look for common data trends that occur over multiple years. So we're blessed to be able to have multiple years worth of data in multiple assessments, and that helps us make informed decisions. We analyze subject-specific reports, and so that allows us to uncover strengths and weaknesses specific to the content and evaluate the textbooks that we use in our classes and even think about sequencing. We use the assessment and we put the data in the hands of our teachers so they can also make good decisions with regard to their own subject areas. And then particularly from the College and Career Office, we do use the test scores as nomination criteria for some collegiate level programs. And that, of course, comes directly from the college or university. They have certain criteria that students must meet, and sometimes that includes standardized testing results. So when we think about standardized testing for the future and for the purpose of this webinar, we're going to focus on those high school assessments. College Board is a rather large nonprofit organization that houses a lot of different assessments. They offer the PSAT 8-9, the PSAT NMSQT, the SAT, and AP exams. Additionally, 2 things that we will not get to cover today, they also have SAT subject tests, and they offer CLEP examinations. And you may have heard of CLEP before. Those are offered in 34 areas for a fraction of the cost that it would that a student would incur to take a college course. And the CLEP examinations allow students to take care of some of those college credits through one of those official College Board CLEP assessments. Our 9th graders take the PSAT 8-9, and our 10th and 11th graders take the PSAT NMSQT. Beginning in the junior year typically is when students start practicing or taking rather the SAT, and then our AP exams again are offered to 10th through 12th graders. With regard to the SAT and the ACT, As far as timing is concerned, I would say to begin trying the SAT and ACT in the fall of the junior year, and then see which your child prefers and focus on that. We'll talk about timing a little bit more, but generally that begins in the junior year. In addition to all those College Board assessments, the ACT Corporation has their own college entrance examination called the ACT, and then a fairly new standardized assessment that we've seen come onto the scene is the Classic Learning Test, the CLT. This is also a college entrance exam, and it's online, computer-based rather than paper-based like the SAT and ACT. And we'll talk a little bit more about those differences between the three exams in just a moment. Before we get into the nitty-gritty of each of these exams, I want to remind you all of something that we've kind of said in every webinar so far, and that is that while we do need to talk about standardized testing results, just like I said last time about grades, we want to be able to be careful not to have our students identify with their score only. Their scores certainly do not define who they are, just as maybe when you and I took the SAT or ACT many years ago, that was definitely not our defining factor of who we are. And we always want to point students back to that purpose and calling. There's a really nice quote from a professor, Professor Madison Surratt, and he said, today, speaking to his trigonometry college students, he said, today I give you two examinations, one in trigonometry and one in honesty. I hope you pass them both, but if you fail one, let it be trigonometry. And I think this quote reminds us of how to keep the right priorities at the front for our students. And so while standardized testing is an important consideration, and that's why we're doing a webinar on it today, it's not the most important. And so we want our students to definitely keep that in the right perspective. So for the PSAT 8-9 and the PSAT NMSQT, these tests are designed to prepare students for the SAT that they will be taking beginning the junior year. The sections on these two assessments include reading, writing and language, and then mathematics, both a calculator section and a section where students cannot use their calculators. At WCCS, we offer both of these assessments October of each year, and we offer it at WCCS. And we've been blessed for the last several years to even open some seats up to our homeschool families in the area at a limited capacity. So we do have some seats available to our guests as well. For both of these assessments, the results are generally available December of the year that students take the tests. Now, with regard to the National Merit Scholarship Qualifying Test, that is a mouthful there, those qualifiers are notified in September of the senior year after they've taken the test in the junior year. The National Merit Scholarship Qualifying Test, you see those letters there, NMSQT. This is based on the selection index score from the PSAT taken the traditional junior year. And if students score high enough with that selection index, then they are notified in September of their senior year that they qualify to move through this scholarship competition. And students do that in conjunction with their administrator or their guidance counselor. And if selected through that competition, they can be named an honoree, a semifinalist, and even a finalist. And there are various awards and scholarships available to those partnering colleges and universities, depending on where they land in the competition. So it's a really cool opportunity for students who take the PSAT. What we're finding with the CLT as a new kind of assessment is they are trying to be competitive with this area, and they also offer scholarships based on their scores. So we'll be keeping a lookout for that. The CLT is still very new, so we're learning more and more about it all the time. The SAT is another assessment offered through College Board, and this is a college entrance examination, and it is paper-based. The sections mimic what students see on the PSAT. You will see reading, writing and language, math, both calculator and no calculator, and there is an optional essay as well. It's offered about 7 to 8 times per year, depending on the calendar, And the testing sites are available based on a student's home address. So when students are doing the online registration for the SAT and they put in their home address, the College Board will automatically populate what testing centers are available within a close driving range. You can extend it far beyond where you live if you like, but they start with the closest centers first. Results are available 2 to 3 weeks after each test date, and students receive an email to the email that they have as part of their SAT portal with a secure link to check those scores. With the SAT, students can go into their SAT portal and select colleges and universities and scholarship programs to receive their scores. Now, when students are beginning this in the junior year, I do not suggest sending the scores to colleges or universities or scholarship programs when they're first trying the test. First, they should try it, see where they land, set some goals, and then sending the scores to colleges and scholarships really is part of that senior year process for admissions and financial aid consideration. So this is not something that students have to do the very first time they try the SAT or even the ACT or CLT. You'll see a lot of similarities with the ACT. It is, again, a college entrance examination, paper-based, just like the SAT. The sections are a bit different. So you'll see English, math, and that is all calculator. There's a reading section, a science section, and again, you see the optional essay. It's offered 7 to 8 times per year, and I think the SAT and ACT corporations get together. I never see test dates overlap, and they're offered on Saturdays most of the time. So they must get together and coordinate with each other's calendars, so you'll never have a conflict there. Again, the testing sites are available based on your home address, and results are available 2 to 3 weeks by email. You'll get that secure link. And ACT also allows students to select colleges and scholarship programs to receive scores. Again, just like with the SAT, I wouldn't suggest sending those scores the first time a student takes the ACT, but certainly after they have seen what they've been able to do and set appropriate goals, they can start sending the scores then. With the SAT and ACT, as part of the registration, what you'll notice is that you can select colleges before testing, up to 4 of them for free. And so some, especially during the senior year, students take advantage of this once they've been able to see their scores and kind of can anticipate what they will be. Sometimes students will go ahead and do that as part of the registration process. Otherwise, if you wait until after testing, it's approximately $12 to $15 per college to send an official score report. So that's something to keep in mind. The CLT, very new to college entrance examination options, it is computer-based. The sections here are slightly different: English, math, and there's no calculator allowed at any part of that test, critical thinking skills, and an optional essay. This is right now offered approximately 6 times per year. Some of the dates are exclusive to partner schools that have offered to host the CLT for all of their high school students. So there aren't many times yet where an individual can take it, but right now we're seeing it to be offered about 6 times a year. Testing sites are available, again, based on the home address, but what we've seen with COVID is that when SAT and ACT were having to cancel because their test centers were closing, because the CLT is computer-based, they were able to Zoom in proctors and offer the students the test remotely. So they really weren't impacted with COVID as far as having to cancel their test dates, which is something to consider. Results are available more quickly than the SAT and ACT, generally speaking. Some of our students that have taken it have received their test scores within 48 hours of taking the test. But CLT says that they can have the results available up to 8 days after the test date. So particularly our seniors who may be in a time crunch and needing a test score very quickly, if their college or university of interest will accept the CLT, this might be something to consider as far as timing is concerned as an option for admissions. And then again, you can select colleges and scholarship programs to receive these scores as well. As a caution with this CLT, because it is so new, there are limitations to how many colleges and universities are currently accepting the CLT as a college entrance examination. You can certainly go to the testing website and see what schools currently accept those scores. So every time I meet with students, this is the question that I get: which one should I take? So I have a couple of suggestions to help answer that question. First, it is essential to remember that the SAT and ACT are both accepted equally at all colleges and universities in the United States. This generally was not the thing when we were possibly going through admissions processes with colleges, but it is, in fact, both are equally accepted at all colleges and universities. The CLT we're seeing is accepted at many private colleges and universities, and again, that listing is on the CLT website. When thinking about which one is right, there are a few things to think about. What content is being tested? In particular, the ACT, having that additional science section, is that a strength for our students or a weakness? That might be something to consider. Timing. So one of the big differences with the SAT and ACT is how they time their individual sections. For example, the ACT gives fewer seconds per math question than the SAT. So that's something to consider. If I know that I need more time in processing my math, then I may lean towards the SAT. The test method. So now we have always had these paper-based options in the SAT and ACT, but if we know our students may really benefit from a computer-based test, then we might be looking at the CLT more seriously. And again, we know that there are limitations to the colleges and universities who accept that, but that's something to consider. We obviously want to think about the college and university requirements. Although all colleges and universities accept the SAT and ACT equally, you may notice that some colleges want SAT subject tests. And so that's something that you'll want to make part of your research when you're looking at admissions requirements for colleges. In addition, colleges and universities sometimes have requirements within the subsections of these tests. So if you are looking at majoring in nursing, for example, some colleges want particular math section scores to show readiness for the program. And so that's something that you want to consider. And then, of course, scholarship criteria. We'll talk about that in just a second, but that's something else that we want to consider when we're trying to decide which test is the right one for me. You'll see in these little odd shapes over here a couple of notes. My suggestion for all juniors is to try both the SAT and ACT, and if applicable, the CLT, one time in the fall of the junior year. See which one you hate less. And yes, I say that to students all the time. Standardized testing is probably the least fun thing to talk about when we think about college and career, but it is necessary. And so we want our students to try those tests, see which one they prefer, and then they can focus on that beginning the spring of the junior year and beyond. They may even be taking it the senior year, and that's fine. We also want to remember that some schools are test optional. This is not with regard to COVID, which I'll talk about in a minute, but some colleges have adopted a test optional philosophy for the last several years, where they put more emphasis on grades, recommendations, and a student's writing ability through added essays and short answer questions. And so if you know that your child is not a good test taker, which we hear that a lot, you may want to expand your exploration when thinking about future plans for college and university to those who have test optional policies, so that your child can instead showcase their grades, their extracurriculars, their leadership and service, rather than feeling the pressure of a standardized assessment like the SAT or ACT. Another question I get is, of course, when, and we've talked about that, but also how many times am I going to take it? In my time as college and career counselor, I've had some students take one of these tests one time, and I've had some of these students take these tests lots of times. So again, I suggest starting the fall of the junior year. Focus on one once you realize what your preference is. set a goal for admission. So what are the colleges and universities you really like? What are they looking for to get into the school? And then set another goal for scholarship. Generally, we see that the score to get into a school may be slightly lower than what the scholarship offerings are. And so while we want to get into the school, we definitely want financial aid. And so is there a way, if I get an increase in my test score, can I get more scholarship dollars? Something else to consider is super scoring. So what super scoring is essentially is, with regard to the SAT in particular, is a student may take the test 4 times. And within those 4 times, his English was the highest his first time and his math was highest his 3rd time. The College Board says that they can super score, and most colleges and universities accept this super score where they take the highest English, the highest math, and put it together as if it is one score report. A caution here is that some schools still want to see every attempt a student makes on these tests. They still will super score, but they still want to see if it took 6 times or 3 times, and they use that information as they feel necessary. Currently, the ACT historically has not super scored within their sections, but if you visit their website, they do have language suggesting that they are going to move to a super scoring method within those subsections, and they will use those subsection scores to create the highest possible composite score. I haven't seen that data come through yet to see what it's like in real time, but you can definitely read more about that at act.org. Now, let's talk about COVID. It's impacting everything around us, right? And so standardized testing is no exception there. Currently, for current seniors, there are a lot of colleges and universities, almost all as a matter of fact, who have adopted a temporary test optional policy. So that means that if students have a test score and want to submit it for admission purposes, they certainly can. But for this year, it's not required. Some schools have extended that test optional policy to include our current juniors or rising seniors, but not all have done that yet. So what I'm suggesting to students and their families as they're researching their college options is to ask the individual colleges and universities what plans they have in place if COVID continues to impact the options that we have for standardized testing. We are seeing a lot of test centers in the area closing due to COVID, and so we know that colleges and universities are keeping an eye on that as well, and so we may see in the springtime an extension of these test optional policies. But for now, since we aren't seeing it across the board, juniors should definitely be making plans to take these standardized tests and focus on some goals for being admitted to college and for scholarship. Particularly for our South Carolina residents, it's essential that our students are taking the standardized tests because a lot of our state scholarships offered through the state of South Carolina are connected to our GPA, our rank, and our test score. And so it's not, COVID is not going to cancel everything with regard to standardized test requirements. And so we want to keep up to date with that. Now, I want you to see some examples of averages from some of the higher education institutions that our students have attended or are looking to attend. Each school, you'll notice, has slightly different averages. When you visit a school's admissions website, you may find that colleges will say they require certain scores. But more times than not, rather than seeing a requirement for the SAT, ACT, or even the CLT, you just see averages. These averages fluctuate based on the freshmen who are enrolled, not just the accepted students, but who actually comes to the school. They compile this data and show the averages. At Winthrop, you can see the average SAT for currently enrolled freshmen is around the 1080 mark. And this does not include the optional essay. And I'll make a note about that. For all of those standardized tests, you notice that the essay is optional. That is because that most colleges and universities do no longer require the essay as part of the score. So some of our students forego that essay each time they attempt it. It saves them some time, and that's okay. Most colleges and universities do not require that essay. The average ACT at Winthrop is a 22, and you can see that North Greenville's averages for this year are slightly higher. USC, even higher. And so what we want students to do and families is to consider the averages when setting goals for standardized testing. Is there a realistic opportunity for a student to reach these goals? And if so, can they then increase it slightly for more scholarship dollars? As you can see with York Technical College and other two-year schools, they may not have a test requirement because either they're test optional or they have their own examination. Particularly at York Tech, they have the AccuPlacer exam. And this is exactly what it's called, a placement examination. So it's not an exam to see if you can come to York Tech, but rather it's an exam to showcase which coursework would be most appropriate starting out that first year. Now, there are ways to even be exempt from the placement exams at some two-year schools. York Tech establishes those averages that you see there on the screen. If students are able to obtain these particular SAT or ACT scores, then they won't even have to take the AccuPlacer exam. So every single college and university has a different way of approaching standardized testing results. And when you consider college options, you want to consider, am I a strong test taker? Is that the emphasis that a college is going to put on my admissions profile? And we just have to approach that accordingly and be prepared for whatever that answer might be. So let's talk about scholarships a little bit. As I mentioned before, scholarships standardized testing results play a role in scholarship offerings. Generally speaking, an increase in a test score means an increase in dollars. And next time we meet together, we'll be talking about financial aid and scholarships, and I'll actually show you this, some comparisons from our universities in the area. But scholarships are hardly ever offered just based on test score, and so we almost always see a connection to the cumulative GPA. So we do want to consider both of those factors when setting goals for scholarship options. Standardized testing is also used to determine a variety of financial aid options, including merit-based scholarships that would come directly from the college or university, need-based scholarships, state-level scholarships, and athletic scholarships. Specifically with athletics, we're referring to eligibility. There is a GPA and test score requirement depending on each division within the NAIA or the NCAA or another athletic organization that we partner with for collegiate recruitment. And again, this will all be discussed in much more detail in our next webinar session, so I hope you'll join us for that. When we think about standardized testing, there are a couple of things that are available to help families. One is fee waiver. So fee waivers are available, and the SAT and ACT use the Food and Nutrition Service, the Income Eligibility Guidelines, to determine if a family is eligible. For our Westminster students, if you would like to know if you're eligible, you simply need to email me and we'll start that process together. Additionally, accommodations are available on standardized assessments. And so these are the accommodations a student would receive on a standardized assessment is based on the accommodations received at the high school. And so what we generally see is students must be receiving and utilizing services at the high school in order to receive those accommodations on the standardized assessments. Now, with regard to SAT and ACT, each have different procedures for getting approved accommodations. For our Westminster students, I help with that along with Mrs. Janice Carter, and so we would be able to walk through this with families if you feel that this might be something you wanted to look into for your child. Okay, so how to prepare. Now we wish we could just walk into these tests and give it our best shot and it be just the perfect score each time, but that's not generally the case. So how can students prepare? The thing to remember is that consistency is key. There are several free resources available. The first three that you see listed there are free to students. Khan Academy and ACT Academy, several of our students have used this in the past. It's video-based, it's an online platform, and so you really can utilize these free options. And in my opinion, I think it's important to give our kids a chance to show responsibility with what's free, see if they can be consistent and pace themselves appropriately before we step into those prep services that can generally cost quite a bit of money. So there are outside prep options as well. Some of our students have been using Benthal test prep. We have method test prep, and there's just a wide range of test prep options, but you'll definitely want to consider the costs there. A note about Khan Academy and ACT Academy as well. These academies are based on current standardized tests with SAT and ACT. And the feedback I get from students, if they're using Khan Academy to prep for the SAT, they are getting a lot, if not all, of what they need for the ACT as well. So they'll see a lot of overlap with these preparations. You can also purchase test prep booklets. That's probably what a lot of us did when we were in high school. But one thing that I see students do a lot lately is rather than preparing for the entire assessment, they often will focus on one content area. Maybe they're going to prepare just for the math section this time. So that may be something that students consider, and it helps prevent that overwhelming feeling of preparing for the test as a whole. Another thing to consider when preparing for the tests is not only what's being tested, but how to test. And so strategy is a big part of doing well on these standardized assessments. And the SAT and ACT and CLT all offer ways to have the best strategies as you go into these tests. So that's something to consider. Now, when you are researching SAT prep, you can see the caution I have here on the screen. Make sure that you are looking at test prep that is 2016 and beyond for the SAT in particular. The reason being is that in March of 2016, College Board revamped, changed, and did a lot of major renovations to the assessment. Not only the content, but how it is scored. So you want to make sure that if you are using test prep, that it's 2016 and beyond. When this happened, I had to recycle a lot of my test prep booklets that were prior to that. So do remember that caution there. So some other strategies, again, studying consistently over a long period of time is essential. Cramming just will not work in these standardized assessments. Another strategy that some of my students have used successfully is instead of beginning by reading the passages, particularly in the English sections, it may be beneficial to read the questions first and then read the passage. By reading the questions, you can anticipate what you need to be looking for and underline keywords and phrases. And that directly connects us to the next strategy, which is how to manage our time wisely on these assessments. Another thing to consider is picking those battles when it comes to the questions that maybe we've looked at for 10 minutes and just nothing's coming to us, right? So we have to pick our battles, and we may need to skip that question to get to the 3 or 4 that we're confident on and then come back if we can. The other strategy that I encourage students all the time on is bubble in everything. There should not be a question left unanswered, because students get points for what is correct. They do not have points deducted for what is wrong. And so if that 5-minute call is happening and there's 10 questions left, consider just bubbling in to the best of your ability and hoping that we get some points there. So bubble in everything is one of the best strategies that students can remember. I want to give you just a couple of perspectives of people who are in the throes of standardized testing right now. A high school senior says, I encourage everyone to take the SAT and ACT and to study extensively for the tests. Doing well on these tests will greatly benefit you in the future as you try to get into an amazing college. And this student is correct. While it's not the most important part of the admissions process, it is a necessary part of the admissions process, and we want our students to be putting their best foot forward. From a high school parent, it helps to be flexible with which kind of testing might be a fit for your student. Again, what's the preference there? Start to experiment with testing early in the junior year. Do not turn scores into colleges, as I said before, and this allows you to get an idea of how your student performs. From there, set goals for your student. This is key, without comparing his or her performance to those of other students. Again, we have talked about this, I think, in every session. Our best is different from the next person's, and we want to keep that in mind for our kids. Find resources to help, and again, from a spiritual perspective, I love this. Their futures are not held by College Board or the ACT, and aren't we so glad of that? God has made our children with particular gifts and needs. He's the one who has their plans. So balancing good stewardship and diligence with the right perspective of God's sovereignty is a place where this particular parent is continually challenged, and I think we can be challenged in that same way. So a quick review as we're finishing up for today. At WCCS, we offer standardized testing from grades 4K all the way through 12th, and we use those results for a variety of reasons. Standardized testing is something that we must consider when making plans for the future, and we have to carefully consider which option is most appropriate and make a plan that connects to those future goals. Here is where individual meetings become very important, because we can discuss those individual needs and goals and really have a good talk about what previous scores a student has and how to move forward. Fee waivers and accommodations are available to some of our families, and so that's something that you want to research and see if you can seek out to help your child as they go through these standardized assessments and as you consider the cost. So each standardized test costs between $47 and $55 in that range, and so you want to make sure that you are utilizing fee waivers if possible, but certainly encouraging students to put their best foot forward each time so that we aren't looking at testing so many times that we're really spending a lot of money. We need to recognize the necessity of standardized testing, but keep it in its appropriate place, right? Scores do not define our students. In my role, I want to keep in front of our students and families that God prepares appropriate placement based on each child's design. And we have to promote this idea. We want our students to give their best, realizing that it's not the same as the next person. So therefore, different doors will be opened for each child. And we shouldn't spend our time wishing doors had been opened for us that were never intended for us. And we have to help our kids learn that. And our last session, our last webinar, will actually be talking about this, celebrating God's yeses and nos, and when He opens doors and when He closes doors. And then, of course, schedule an individual meeting with those you have access to discuss those goals for standardized testing. For our Westminster students, you'll be getting your PSAT scores, our 9th through 11th graders, in December. And so once you receive those score reports, you may want to give me a call or email or set up something so that we can discuss, okay, what does this mean and where can we go from here? As always, if you do have questions that are individual to your family and your needs, please use my contact information here on the screen. If you do have any questions, feel free again to type those into the Q&A section. I'll give you just a second here before we finish up. When we return from Thanksgiving break, we will have a financial aid and scholarships webinar. I'm very excited to host that on December 2nd. And again, if you aren't able to attend one or more of the sessions, they will be available on YouTube, and you can share those links with friends and family that you think may benefit as well. I am so excited to see you next time. I don't see any questions in the Q&A for now, so I hope you have a wonderful Thanksgiving. I'm going to close us in prayer, and I am excited to see you in December. Let's pray. God, you're good to us. I thank you for today. I thank you for each family represented again in this webinar. And Lord, we ask that you grant success to our students as we think about standardized testing. Lord, that they would study well, prepare well, and give their best effort on these standardized assessments as they are a part of future planning. And Lord, we as families, as moms, as dads, as faculty and staff, we will remember eager to encourage our kids to give you the honor and glory for what they are able to accomplish. And we will be challenged to do the same thing. God, thank you for loving us and for being so patient with us. Would you grant us protection as we head into Thanksgiving break? Lord, just put your hedge of protection around each of our families as we are navigating COVID and all of those safety things that we have to think about. Lord, most of all, let us remember to be thankful, not just this season, but all the time for all that you have done and continue to do. We love you, Lord. Amen. Thank you for joining me. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.